What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today I wanted to make a video about Call of Duty Warzone covering the loadouts and essentially just some tips for making your own loadouts for any newer players who are only just getting into the game. Loadouts are arguably the most important aspect of Warzone as they take away the luck of looting and allow everyone to choose their weapons for the remainder of the game, which kind of evens the playing field a bit and allows for the game to be a bit more skill based rather than winning or losing a gunfight based on how lucky or unlucky you were when you were looting. Because of that, I think it is really important to make sure your loadouts are set up how you like them, and so today I am pretty much just going to be giving a few tips for the weapons, perks and gadgets that I think will give you the best loadouts in Call of Duty Warzone. Obviously, weapons are the most important part of any loadout, but I will leave those for last, so starting off we are going to focus on the best perks to choose. Now, I need to make it clear I'm far from being the best Warzone player out there, and this is all just opinion based as well. So none of these are objectively the best or anything like that, these are mostly just the perks that I personally tend to run in my own loadouts. Starting off with the first perk slot, and there are a couple of perks in here that can be viable options. The one that I've been running more lately is the EOD perk, which is essentially just flak jacket from the older games, which just reduces the amount of damage you take from non-killstreak explosives and fire. Obviously, with all the RPG and C4 spam out there, this really is a helpful perk to run. It can end up being the difference between life and death, so if you do want a bit more survivability, then this is a very good option. There are also the double time and cold blooded perks that I used to run, and I do see these being used a fair bit. Double time allows for a longer tactical sprint and 30% faster crouch speed, and cold blooded allows you to not be seen by thermal scopes or AI targeting systems. Moving on to the second perk slot, and this one has easily got the best perks in the game. For this slot, it really depends on how you want to play, as well as whether or not you plan on getting 2 loadouts throughout the match, as that does actually drastically change what you'll choose for this perk slot. The Overkill perk allows you to carry 2 primary weapons, which is obviously very handy, but then there is also the Ghost perk, which is no doubt the most important perk in the game, and is almost necessary to win in my opinion, so it does come down to how you do want to play it. For example, I've got a few classes set up where I've got Overkill equipped, which allows me to get 2 really good weapons of choice, and also essentially doubles my ammo as I can have 2 fully loaded weapons. Then I actually have a few loadouts where I have the Ghost perk, so that if I do come across a second loadout throughout the game, I can actually grab Ghost and then my weapons will drop at that loadout, meaning I can still have 2 primary weapons and Ghost at the same time. I will touch on this a little bit more when I get into the weapons, but for now that's essentially all you need to know, that these 2 perks are probably the most important in this second slot, and in my opinion, even though there are some other great perks in there, you almost have to choose one of these 2 for your loadout. Now, as for the third perk slot, there's probably 3 perks in here that are all relatively even, and it really does just come down to personal preference. Tune Up is great if you're playing in a squad, as it gives you faster revive time, so it can come up clutch in tense situations, although it is obviously very situational. Battle Hardened is another good one that pretty much reduces the effect of stun grenades and stuff like that, although it doesn't fully remove the effect either, so as handy as it is, sometimes you can still get beaten when you're stunned even with this perk equipped. Lastly, there is the Tracker perk, which pretty much just shows the enemy footsteps when they've recently run through that area, which can be really handy when an enemy is running away and you're trying to chase them down, or even if you accidentally come across someone in a building, it can help you identify that there is an enemy in that building. So that's pretty much it for the perk choices. Obviously it is best to play around a little bit and see which ones suit you the best, but pretty much any of those perks can be really handy in the right situation. Now, moving on to the gadgets, and starting off with the lethal gadget, in my opinion the C4 is literally the only one you should choose no matter what loadout you're running. C4s are easily the most versatile lethals in the game. You can throw them like a grenade, you can plant them like a claymore, and you can use them to blow up vehicles as well. So as far as I'm concerned, you should run C4 on every single loadout. As for your tactical gadget, however, there are a couple of different options to choose from. I'd say about 90% of people tend to run the heartbeat sensor, as it can be so handy in certain situations, so this is a really solid option to choose from. However, it does also have a few drawbacks. 1, it can sometimes distract you from what's actually happening on the screen, and 2, anyone with Ghost won't show up, so later on in the game they can actually become a little bit useless. I've personally been trying to switch to the stun grenade recently, especially when I'm playing with mates, as I feel like the stun grenade is more useful in a deadly situation. For example, if you are getting pushed really hard, then a stun can be the difference between winning and losing that gunfight. The other option is actually the smoke grenade, which again is mostly for just when you're playing with friends, as this can be really helpful for rezzing your teammates or just laying down some cover and making a quick escape. The only downside to smoke is that obviously thermal scopes can see through it, so it does have a direct counter. In terms of which one you choose choose, really it does come down to personal preference. I'd say the heartbeat or the stun are definitely the best options, but again it comes down to your playstyle and which one suits you the best. If you're a little bit of a slower player, then the heartbeat might be the best option, whereas if you are more aggressive, then the stun might help you out with pushing enemies. So that is it for all of the perks and gadgets, and now lastly I just want to touch on the weapons as well as which weapons to use in which loadouts and stuff like that. Starting off with the assault rifles, since they are pretty much the best class of weapon, and in my opinion the Grau is definitely one of the better weapons in the game, if not the best overall. This thing has really low recoil yet still has a pretty high rate of fire, so it is deadly at that sort of close to mid range, but it is still really decent at long range as well. I have mine set up, as you can see on screen, having the monolith suppressor, which I should just say right now you need to be using a suppressor on every single weapon that you choose. And then it has the Tempest barrel attachment, the FSS Blackjack stock, the Cronin Shark 2 underbarrel attachment, and the 60 round mags just to allow for a little bit of spray and pray if I do need it. All of those attachments are essentially just increasing the accuracy, range and control of the weapon, which you can see by the stats down in the bottom left, all at the cost of a bit of extra mobility, which means I run slightly slower and have a slightly slower ADS speed, which is definitely worth it for the extra accuracy at range. Now this thing is really just a jack of all trades in this game. It's decent enough that you can do really well at close range, almost as well as an SMG can do, but then you also get some very serious range on it as well, so it is good in pretty much any situation. I personally don't run any optics on it because I do actually like the iron sights. However, if you're not a fan of having iron sights, or maybe you just want some more range, then swapping out the underbarrel attachment or the stock can be a viable alternative. Now, the Grau is hardly the only option to choose from the assault rifles in this game. The M4 and M13 are both essentially the exact same as the Grau, with just some slightly different stats and a slightly different feeling, and so you can pretty much run those same attachment setups on either of those weapons as well, and they will give you the same sort of results. It does all come down to which one feels best for you. Alternatively, there is a crazy good setup for the M4 that I actually just did a video on last week, where you can drastically increase your damage at the cost of having less ammo per clip, 10 shots to be precise. For this setup, I actually run the Overkill perk and use the MP5 as backup, since this M4 can put you in a bit of trouble if you do miss your shots, so if you are going to go with this build, then I would recommend doing that as well. For this M4 build, you want to have it set up roughly the same way that I do here, with a suppressor, a scope of some sort for that added accuracy, a foregrip, and in my opinion the sleight of hand perk to allow faster reloads in a pinch. The most important part though is the 10 round SOCOM mags. These are what increases the damage for the M4, and as you'll see by some of the gameplay on screen, if you do land your shots, you can drop enemies in just a matter of seconds, giving them essentially no chance to even try and fight back. This setup is definitely a bit of a harder one to get the hang of if I'm going to be honest, but if you do consider yourself to be decent enough aim, then I would highly recommend giving it a crack, as it can be really solid. Now, touching quickly on the MP5, again, how you set it up really does just come down to how you like it, so give it a crack with heaps of different attachments across a bunch of different matches, but I'll show you on screen roughly how I have it set up. This setup actually sacrifices a little bit of mobility for higher accuracy and range, which might seem a little bit odd for an SMG, but it does still do extremely well in close quarters, and so having a bit of range on it as well just makes it even more deadly, especially in combination with that M4. For example, maybe your enemy is one shot after you empty 10 shots with the M4, so you can quickly whip out the MP5 and just finish them off rather than having to reload, and for me personally, that's just how I prefer to use it. This setup can pretty much be switched out for any other SMG though. The MP7, the P90 and the AUG are all very solid alternatives, but just make sure you use a setup with a lot of ammo per clip, as the SMG will likely be used as more of a spray and pray weapon to save you when the M4 isn't viable. Now, last but definitely not least, I wanted to touch on the sniper rifles, and for me it's between the HDR and the AX50. As I've mentioned about 186 times in this video, it really does just come down to which one you prefer. For me personally, it is the AX50 all the way, but I'm fairly sure there's pretty much no difference between the two stats wise, so just see for yourself which one you prefer. As for how my snipers are set up, as unpopular as this opinion might be, I actually barely care at all about the ADS speed and prefer to focus a lot more on the accuracy and range for the AX50, as I'm not trying to quickscope or do trick shots or anything like that. All I want is high accuracy at range, and so how I set it up on screen is exactly how I do that. I do have the laser sight equipped, so that does actually increase the ADS speed while also allowing for more accuracy, so that is actually a very nice middle ground. Now, I see a lot of people running the 7 or 9 round mags on these sniper rifles, and to be honest, I think that's pretty pointless because very rarely is that going to be of use compared to the use of having another attachment to increase your accuracy or your ADS speed. It's not very often that you'll be saved by having those extra shots in the magazine. If you reload and keep firing, it's only going to cost you a few extra seconds, and if you do have cover at long range, then that's hardly going to be an issue. So I'm not going to say don't use the extended mags. If you do like them, then go for your life, but at least for me personally, I prefer saving that slot for a lot more useful attachment. So that's pretty much it for all of the weapons as well. Obviously there's a lot that I missed and even some that I didn't really go into detail, but I will be making more videos on loadouts in the future. So if you do have any questions about specific weapons, don't hesitate to let me know down in the comments. Now lastly, I am just going to go through all of my own loadouts and literally just explain what exactly they're used for, just to kind of tie all of this video together. So first off, my top two loadouts are both identical, one having the Growl and one having the AX50. Both of these do have Ghost, and these two are here pretty much for late in the game. If I'm trying to get Ghost, I can choose which one I need depending on which weapon I need the most. For example, maybe I just got back from the Gulag and there's only 25 left in the game. I land, find a decent SMG or assault rifle or something like that, and then manage to find a loadout. Well, in that situation I would choose the AX50 so that I have both a sniper and an automatic. I then have a class purely for playing with friends. This one has the MP5 and the AX50, and then I use the tune-up perk for the quicker revive time, and a stun grenade instead of the heartbeat sensor since my teammates generally all use them, so it is kind of pointless for me to have one as well. The next one is that high damage loadout that I mentioned earlier with the max damage M4, so I don't really need to touch too much on that one. And then the one below that is actually the exact same as that squad setup, but with the M13 instead of the MP5, just in case I do want an AR instead of an SMG. Next up is just a test build. Sorry, I won't even bother covering that. That's just one that I edit pretty much all the time and try some new weapons to mess around, so that one really isn't all that useful right now. I then have the MP7 loadout, which is exactly the same as my Growl and AX51s at the top, but again, just replacing those weapons with the MP7 if I do feel like I need an SMG instead. Lastly, there is what I call my safe loadout, which is exactly how it sounds. This is literally just the safest option if I feel like I need to get a well-rounded loadout. This one has the Growl and the MP5, which are probably two of my best weapons outside of a sniper, and then I've kept the heartbeat sensor just to be safe and the EOD perk for that extra survivability. So those are all the tips that I have for setting up your loadout, and with that, that is going to be the end of the video. If you did enjoy the video, then make sure to smash that like button down below and let me know in the comments what loadout setups you guys are running, as there are plenty of other setups that can work just as well. If you are new, then consider subscribing to the channel and turning on those notifications so you don't miss out on any videos or live streams. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.